Hey everyone, welcome to Community Roots, a place where we gather in community to talk about mental health so we can travel the journey of life together. I'm Samuel Richards.
I'm Julie Richards.
I'm Sarah Wakefield.
And thanks so much for joining us today. You know, I love the opportunities when we get together, especially, you know, as we're literally going through the journey of life together, whether that's, you know, some serious stuff and some, you know, smaller stuff that might feel serious, like applesauce explosions. I So last time we got together, we talked a little bit about anger, and I'm excited to hand it off to Mom to kind of, you know, expand that conversation, kind of into more emotions in general.
Yeah, and this is, I think, really timely because the Inside Out movie, part 2, comes out in
True.
June. So I'm excited to see what they come up with as they bring in anxiety as something to explore.
Hmm.
Something for us to consider about our emotions that they have kind of the power to be a gift to us, to be able to understand what we're experiencing and feeling on a heart level, on a body sensation level, which we've talked a lot about, that can help us be more present and more engaged with ourselves, our life, our relationships. And then it can also go on to an extreme, if we think in terms of a continuum, where emotions can either on one end kind of run the show, where we're letting an emotion be so big that it's overpowering and really dominating everything that we see or do or experience. Or on the other end of the spectrum, we would be suppressing our emotions and kind of stuffing things down or avoiding checking in with what we're feeling and kind of putting them metaphorically in the closet or under the rug, sweeping things under the rug, and just try to keep going without really using those feelings and emotions as indicators to us, like our check engine light, that something's going on under the hood. And instead, we just override it and we keep going. And so, being able to slow things down, because emotions often kind of group together and feel tangled or overwhelming whenever a lot is happening. There's a lot of emotion, not only in us, but sometimes between us with another person, because they bring all of their emotions and histories and personality and stress level all to the table as well. So if we can slow it down and kind of notice what is coming up for us, what we're feeling, then we're able to find some of the gifts that emotions are able to bring us if we can name them and process them effectively.
I do
So,
like the idea of even the check engine light
Mhm.
versus, you know, because you can like notice it and you can choose to not do anything about it or even just decide maybe it's your low on gas light, but you know, hey, I'm close to food, it doesn't matter. So you can kind of like notice it and then kind of fulfill the need. And if you just notice it or don't notice it, or you know, notice it and ignore it, then you've got an engine on fire.
Mhm.
And so I kind of like that analogy just because, well, I mean, not pleasant, but it is kind of an interesting thing. What were you saying, Sarah?
no, I was just going to jump right in to suggest we identify these emotions. Julie's got this great chart that lists out 8 emotions. And I don't think I've ever spent a lot of time identifying types of emotions
Mm.
and putting them into buckets. I've
Mm.
I've really operated with like, oh, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm angry,
Sure.
and then kind of going from there, or happy, sad, angry, and ashamed. I think
Mm.
are how I've like bucketed mine.
Mhm.
And to see this chart that we'll talk about, I'm as I feel very educated that
Well,
I
this
want to
is
use it.
This is taken from Pia Melody's work, which we often circle back and give credit to. This is kind of what she noticed were basic emotions that people were experiencing. And she gave them some categories so that they could check in on these 8 basic places and then build from there on each of them have multiple other emotions that feel similar or have other words that describe them so we can kind of have a starting point but then also expand. So last episode we talked about anger, and then added to that in the other basic emotions are fear, pain, joy, passion, love, shame, and guilt. So, in our episode on anger, in this conceptualization that Pia has, is frustration, irritation, resentment, and disgust. So, those are some
See,
ways that
but in
anger might
Inside
show up.
Out, I think frustration and disgust were two, or like anger and disgust were two characters.
Mm.
Anyway, we don't have to talk about that. It's not like they're paying us money or anything. I was just noticing kind of, and it's, you know what also came to mind I wanted to get to before we jumped in? Is there any comment on, I noticed like joy, passion, and love, those kind of evoke positive things within me, where like anger, fear, pain, and guilt kind of are associated with negative things.
Mhm.
Is there any comments on like the balance of that, or I guess?
Officially, we would say there's different ways to interpret this. Some would say that there are not positive or negative emotions, they're all just indicators. So, kind of
Hmm.
neutralizing them a little bit to say some might be more pleasant or unpleasant, but in general, they're just data. They're just information
Mm.
that it's giving us. But we can sometimes generalize to say which emotions are more positive or negative, pleasant or unpleasant. But even in that, what I find super interesting is that it depends on the person, because some people, for instance, have a really hard time feeling joy. So joy might be really unpleasant for them or really difficult to connect with. It feels maybe too hard to get there because of some feelings of depression, or it could be too risky to feel joy if you experience a lot of grief, because if you're vulnerable enough to feel joy, you might actually lose it. So for people who have experienced ongoing grief, which is not just about the death or loss of someone, but it's also more significant losses in terms of identity or relationships or adoption or like various things that can be some really existential processing of things. Um, that can be really hard to feel joy.
That's interesting. What comes to mind is maybe just because they're positive associations, at least within myself, not being sadness avoidant. Like there is a
Mm.
positive um, point to sadness. It's not just a negative emotion that you should be avoidant to.
Which is why I really like this conceptualization of it, because it's saying that each of these emotions have gifts within them.
And I know this is also just a quick thing, but if somebody is feeling like kind of some sadness around passion, would that mean that they like the emotions are running the show or are suppressed, or is that just their new day to day?
Well, I think we definitely can feel more than one emotion at once, and we can feel conflicted about our emotions. So I
And
think when
sometimes
we
they're
have,
tied together.
yeah, if they're kind of blended together, then it bears time and attention to sorting through what's coming up about that. What are we noticing about it? What is it that those emotions want us to hear or understand?
I would say uh, I can I can cycle through these emotions so quickly in the span of a few minutes. or seconds sometimes. I can feel joy and pain like like a whirlwind, or
Mm.
grief and frustration and uh, desire all like flowing through, and it's can feel so complicated.
Mhm.
Like which and I kind of want to find the right one, like what emotion am I actually supposed to be feeling in this moment? But from what you're saying, Julie, it's you're just going to feel all there's no right emotion to feel in any given moment.
Mhm.
I don't have to pick one. I just have to be present in them
Mhm.
because they each bring a gift.
Yeah, and if you want to kind of explore one particular emotion, you can lean into that and try to understand from that lens, like what the sadness is about, for instance, or what is the underlying fear, or what particular blending of emotions there are. One of the things that I've gotten really into
Mm.
since November, I went to a training on card decks, and I am like the queen of card decks now. I've got so many of them on different ways of processing emotions and um golly, there's just so many different ones. But sometimes a card deck is really helpful. And just to give some context, because people might be like, I have no idea what you're talking about, like Jack, Queen, King, spades, clubs,
Yeah.
like not those kind of cards. But lots of different creative, colorful expressions of some of them have things like yoga or meditation, or there's things on the polyvagal theory, there's some on trauma cards that help you look at what are some of the thoughts or emotions or experiences. There's some on ACEs, on adverse childhood experiences. There's lots of different ones on emotions. The one that I just most recently got is um, Feel Wise. And there's like 150 some emotions in there, and the characters in it are very similar actually to Inside Out. But the amount of
Okay.
creativity is enormous, and then they give you different ways of what do we do with our emotions when they come up, like journaling or books on self-care or meditation or movement or exercise, things that we talk about here, but it kind of gives it in that card format. And what's helpful with that is people can kind of go through when they're having all these different emotions, you can kind of line up and sort a little bit of, well, I think I feel some of this too, and kind of group them a little bit or determine which ones are really big, heavy, hard feelings, which ones are easier to feel, other times that we've felt that way. It kind of gives us a way to facilitate more processing. And the fact that they're kind of creative and colorful and have different images with it allows us to engage that right brain, which is where we hold a lot of emotion and also a lot of trauma. And so there's able to be some processing, some movement, some sorting through and feeling like it makes more sense. The idea of making sense of something is what brings resolve in our nervous system. It kind of
Mm.
settles it. It kind of feels like, "Oh, that's why I feel this way," or "Oh, that's what I'm experiencing." Give some validation. And sometimes people can say, "Well, like no wonder I was feeling so much cuz I just picked 20 of these cards, instead of just one or two."
So which one does hungry fit in on this?
Or hangry maybe. I don't
Hangry.
know.
Well, there
Angry.
we got some.
That could
Well,
be
I
something.
do like this list. I think let's start out with at least with a couple. I really enjoy how there's a positive to each one, and then there's kind of like a, oh, we're going a little overboard. So last time, sorry, I totally derailed you from the beginning. Anger. We talked about anger.
Mhm.
And so I like this because, well, Well, I'll say some of the gifts of emotion mom has written here are assertiveness, strength, and energy, which I totally feel.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes I feel anger avoidant because I get nervous once my anger gets too much. So I start to pump the brakes and cycle back. But maybe if I can find that middle ground and, understanding that my anger light is going off without, letting it take control, because some of the things I'm worried about that also show here are volatility, explosive anger, or maybe the opposite. Maybe you're unable to feel anger or you're feeling disempowered. Um, but I can totally see that, but I enjoy the positives where it does give you some oomph.
Yeah, there's definite energy that we feel with anger. It's that sympathetic nervous system. We've sometimes called it the accelerator, like some go, go, go energy to it. And that's allowing us to lean into making sure boundaries are maintained or showing care for someone that they need us to step up to the plate, or there's some strength behind it that you don't want someone to be mistreated or neglected or forgotten or things like that. There's some sense of urgency, I think, to it, of making sure people are cared for, or and that's the assertiveness side. If we take it to too far of an extreme and our anger goes from 0 to 100 and it turns into rage, which we talked about last time, then that's much more explosive, but it's also unpredictable. It's scary. It's like instead of being like a healthy assertiveness, it gets to the point of someone feeling like this person is completely unpredictable or attacking or um, just really intense, like too much.
So not just internal damage can be done, but external damage to those around you will be feeling the effects of this um, when the emotions like run the show or
Hmm.
when they're suppressed.
Hmm. And I think that suppressed emotion that we talked about before, like anger turned inward, being depression, one way of exploring the concept of depression, that is, if I'm unable to feel my anger and I have no power over either how I'm treated or someone I love is treated, um, then all that energy is kind of like pulling me under at that point if I'm not allowing it to be expressed. If I don't have a voice, if I'm not able to show my care or concern for myself or for someone I love, then I'm liable to just feel the heaviness, powerlessness of, well, there's nothing I can do.
Well, as a quick teaser, also because I know we're not going to do all of these, and I really feel like an arc coming on um, with this topic. The suppression responses to a lot of these emotions tend to be numb, feeling alone, worthless, empty, uh, um, unable to feel.
Mhm.
And that's like that seems to be the suppressed results for when we don't allow ourselves to feel these feelings in healthily.
Mhm. And possibly that can come from, in part, either a fear of our emotion or kind of inept to feel. Like no one if no one modeled for us that it's okay to have our feelings, that we can talk about what we're feeling, that we can give care and attention to or time and attention to something, then people don't know what to do with emotion. So they will often stuff it or medicate it or distract themselves, stay busy. I hear that a lot. Like people are just like, well, if I just keep busy, and they put like more on their plate or on their schedule, which of course there's nothing wrong with being active and doing great things unless we're completely overriding our body and all of our emotions and avoiding. If we're only avoiding or denying or suppressing, then those things will, we sometimes say, come out sideways. Like they'll come out
Mhm.
in resentments or arguments that, like, out of nowhere, suddenly it's almost like a pressure cooker, like, it's gonna just explode because I haven't had a chance to say how I've been feeling for a really long time, and I've been stuffing it down, pushing it down. So it can end up causing harm because we weren't willing to lean into a hard conversation or some complicated feelings. But we need a safe space to be able to do those things, and hopefully we can learn, I hope through Community Roots as one avenue for that, but we can learn to have and create safe spaces that we could be courageous enough to hear and to hold and to make sense of and untangle and support that whatever someone is experiencing is valid and needs space to be expressed and heard in ways that are safe and not ways that are explosive or attacking or um, injuring.
I'm really excited about this, Julie. This I love this approach, um, with the positive aspects of the emotions, including the ones that I would, or and kind of like what Samuel said, call more negative emotions, and how they have benefits too, how they have gifts.
Mhm.
And I'm like, this anger. This is really interesting. I'm I'm excited to
Yeah, do we
explore
have
this.
time to kind of play anger and fear next to each other? I'd be curious. I've
Go
been
for it.
told a lot of times that uh, anger's root is fear, but it's interesting that they're separate here.
Mm. Well, and anger is often, we talked about this last time, of like a protector. It's on the
Mm,
outside, but underneath is something vulnerable.
got the amygdala
We've got the
backing me up.
that fear response is rooted often in a very raw place or a vulnerable place. So
Hmm.
in Pia's chart here, it talks about fear also being worry, anxiety, apprehension, and overwhelm. So it could kind of take any of those particular angles. But underneath that fear and within that gift, as we're able to name it and process it, we have wisdom. We've got protection. You know, if I have a fear of something happening, it might give me some insight to making sure I'm careful in how I respond to something. It could protect me, could also preserve something that is needing to be protected. So fear has an important safety component to it that's really good. But if it would go to an extreme, it might get really excessive, or we might obsess, kind of OCD type, overly checking things and being too scared to try anything new or to meet someone, to have a friendship or a connection with someone else. Or there could also, on the other extreme, is I don't have any fear at all. And I just, you know, don't listen to those cues of what I need for safety. And I might end up harmed or injured because I'm not listening to what the fear is or what the hesitation or caution is about.
Is that a bit like when somebody is afraid of feeling fear, and so they suppress it and become what I think of like braggadocious or overly confident because they're afraid of showing fear, and so then they have that lack of, I think it's called protective fear. But I think I've noticed that people who seem to be afraid of nothing, it seems to me like they really are afraid, and they're afraid to share that fear.
Almost like they go into a one up grandiose,
Yeah.
like I don't have any need or any vulnerability, any humanity to me.
Well, and like you were saying, if you don't have anybody in your life who is exemplifying these emotions in healthy ways, then how do you know how to feel fear and not be afraid of that fear?
Mhm.
How do you know that how to kind of use those gifts and be aware of those gifts if nobody's ever shown you that there's there's a benefit.
Hmm. How do
Hmm.
we regulate? How do we manage it? How do we allow ourselves to name it and feel it and be responsive to it? That would be definitely those attachment dynamics that we've talked about is essentially there's a need that is surfacing that we need to pay attention to. So if I have a fear of a particular thing, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of, I don't know, fill in the blank. It's like, how do I work with that and not keep myself stunted, but continue to develop and grow and learn small doses of finding cues of safety and places that I can trust and that I continue to develop and I don't keep myself in a more um, immature or stunted or codependent type state.
It says here one of the downsides to fear is that it leads to anger, which leads to the dark side. So definitely keep your fear in check. Well, I think that's really positive. You know what I like about this is, well, examples are coming to mind for me, at least in my life, or even in my experiences, where anger or fear has been shown in a positive way that shows some, kind of exemplifies the the benefit to the emotion. And maybe in my own anxiety or fear, just the things that I might associate these emotions with, anger, kind of the volatility, and finding examples of assertiveness and strength as well too. I really enjoyed that. Actually, while we were talking, I hit Control P and sent it to my printer upstairs so that I would have a physical copy.
Oh, nice.
But
Put it on their fridge.
yeah, or something. But okay, folks. Well, thanks so much for joining us this week. I appreciate to get back in the flow with y'all as well. So thanks, Sarah and Mom, for being here. Um, yeah, I've got a second for gratitude. So whoever's feeling the gratitudes, feel free to hop in. Mom, you got one?
I am definitely grateful for emotions and feeling and being able to learn and grow in these areas that were probably pretty foreign to me the majority of my life as far as it's something I still remember even in high school buying a book about emotions because I was so intrigued by it. I was like, I need to understand feelings, and I didn't really come from either that generation or my household that we didn't really talk about that. And so I've had so much curiosity about it. And I am really thankful for all the creative ways that we can explore and grow and the path that my journey has been on. I'm super grateful for. And super fun to be with the two of you because we have had a little while since we've been together. So I'm glad to be with you both.
Agreed. I think that's interesting. What have you got, Sarah?
I'm grateful for these emotions and having the opportunity to look at the benefits. I felt like I've visited all 8 emotions multiple times a day for the last definitely for at least a week. And through all of this time with Julie and with you and with my own journey, I've slowly been able to accept sitting in those emotions that feel a little bit more negative, that are really uncomfortable. And I still don't like sitting in them, but I appreciate this gift that they bring me, because my joys do feel a little bit more sweeter when I've, you know, allowed myself to feel the grief and heartache.
Or even I think that some of these provide their own unique where even pain, there can be growth in some pain. And so that being like a whole positive that is anyway, so I think that's great. I like that. Using those opportunities there to kind of notice maybe the positives. That seems great. Mine's gonna be silly. I've Connie and I have been watching Star Trek recently, and
Yes.
I love the conversations that they have on there, like just the moral conversations or discussions they might be having. Um, I think I've missed that kind of discussion, just kind of talking about, hey, just in this situation, what's the right thing to do, and just having an open kind of discussion about it. So not bad. Well,
Well, maybe we should start our own podcast with moral discussions, like a side podcast
oh,
where we
there we
bring up
go.
moral
Or can we?
topics. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Or a spin-off of CR where it's one of our themes. We'll call it Side Trails. Or I don't know. We'll workshop it. Well, thanks so much to everyone for joining us today. I hope you have a great week, and we will talk to you soon.